Republicans are pressing forward with the big, beautiful bill. What's holding things up? What comes next? Democrats are looking for their own Joe Rogan. And are Californians about to force people to eat bugs? All of that and so much more today on 10 Minute Drill.
Everybody get up, get up.
The story of America is the story of an adventure.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
We are a nation under God, and I believe God intended for us to be free.
On Tuesday, we talked about the interesting trend with President Trump's approval rating, that despite a lot of doom and gloom media coverage and attacks from the left, his approval rating has actually been on the rise the last few weeks. Here's a quick clip from CNN talking about this.
Donald Trump's approval rating, his net approval seemed to be falling. He seemed to be adios amigos. People were writing his political obituary. He is rising from the dead. Look at this. Hello, Trump's net approval rating among voters. This is the Reuters Ipsos polling. Look at this. In late April, he was 8 points underwater. But look at where he was in the most recent poll among voters. He's up 7 points.
That approval rating rise is particularly helpful for President Trump as he takes the fight over the big, beautiful bill to Capitol Hill to try and work with Republicans to move this forward. What helps President Trump and Republicans the most is the fact that many of the components of this bill are overwhelmingly popular. Here's CNN talking about the popularity and support for extending those middle-class tax cuts.
Cut taxes, even if the deficit increases. Look at this. 60% overall say, cut those taxes, baby.
Here's how the administration is describing this. It'll cut taxes for people making between $30,000 and $80,000 by 15%. Wages will increase by $6,100 and $11,600 per worker. The typical family will see up to $13,000 more in take-home pay. Tips will no longer be taxed for service workers. Overtime will no longer be taxed for hourly workers such as police officers and first responders. Meanwhile, Democrats are seeing their own messaging challenges against the popular components of this bill. A new memo from House Majority PAC, the group supporting House Democrat campaign efforts, is calling on Democrats to stop using phrases like tax cuts for the rich, and also to stop using hyperbolic language. This comes as CBO released a new report saying that this bill will help the top 10% while it hurts the bottom 10% of Americans. However, this is the same CBO that argued 13 million people would lose their health insurance when Republicans ended the individual mandate, which turned out not to be true. It also argued that the Inflation Reduction Act would actually reduce deficits. It did not. It ballooned deficits. So CBO has a little bit of a credibility problem. But the other thing here is CBO has not parsed out among that bottom 10% of people who are going to lose benefits, who is ineligible for losing those benefits, because the focus of the reforms to these programs, particularly Medicaid and food stamps and SNAP, those cuts are coming to people who should not be on those programs. We're going to talk a lot more about that next week, but just to reiterate, we've talked a lot here about Medicaid and the incredibly popular work requirements that will help Medicaid extend for a long time by getting people off of it who should not be on it, who should not be getting those benefits. SNAP has that same issue on food stamps. Like Medicaid, SNAP has a major issue with overpayments and benefits going to illegal immigrants and able-bodied people who should not be on these programs. So again, we'll get into more of that next week because that seems to be where Democrats are focusing a lot of their fire, arguing that Republicans are cutting benefits for the poorest Americans who need them, when in fact, those cuts are primarily focused on people who should not be on those programs in the first place. President Trump ran on being a change agent who would cut fraud, waste, and abuse. Cutting fraud, waste, and abuse is incredibly popular, and so Republicans will now go on offense on this message, really putting Democrats in a tough position for fighting against reforms that will help SNAP and Medicaid serve the people who actually need them. On Tuesday, the United States Supreme Court ordered the Maine legislature to reinstate Representative Laurel Libby's voting rights after they previously censured her and took away both her and her constituents' representation in the legislature after she revealed that a biological male had won a girls' high school track championship. This decision came after an emergency application from Libby and her constituents, which read, Libby and her district had no vote on the state's $11 billion budget, had no vote on a proposed constitutional amendment, and will have no vote on hundreds more proposed laws, including, most ironically, whether Maine should change its current policy of requiring girls to compete alongside transgender athletes. So again, Maine Democrats took away Laurel Libby's right to vote and took away her constituents' representation on the legislature, which, as this complaint notes, ironically took away her ability to vote on the very issue that she had highlighted in the first place. And if a state legislature can silence somebody based on their views on an issue and take away their vote on that particular issue, that is a major problem that the Supreme Court has now remedied. Federal authorities have announced that they are bringing charges against New Jersey Representative LaMonica McIver, who we now have talked about quite a bit here, was caught on video assaulting and bowling over federal agents at an ICE facility as they were trying to stop and deport dangerous criminal illegal immigrants. Democrats are already fundraising off of McIver's actions, and she's defended herself on TV.
This is political intimidation from the Trump administration. I mean, me being charged is absurd, especially when I'm just there to do my job.
Apparently, Rep. McIver believes that her job is to physically impede the ability of ICE agents to deport illegal immigrants. This comes at the same time as new polling once again reiterates that deporting illegal immigrants is one of the most popular things President Trump is doing. The New York Times reported this week that Democrats are on a frantic search to find the, quote, liberal Joe Rogan. Democrat megadonors are debating plans to spend millions of dollars on a range of influencer plans to find the liberal Joe Rogan. New York Times has pitch decks, investor meetings, and more internal documents. One Democrat has a spreadsheet of 26 different proposals. This has been a common theme since the November election for Democrats: how to fix their damaged brand and their incredibly low approval ratings without making any actual changes to their policies or ideas. We'll see how that goes for them. According to Politico, knives are out for the California Democrats who came from the Biden administration. Former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa took Javier Becerra and Kamala Harris to task. Voters deserve to know the truth. What did Kamala Harris and Javier Becerra know? When did they know it? And most importantly, why didn't either of them speak out? This cover-up directly led to a second Donald Trump term, and as a result, all Californians are paying the price. This came after new revelations from the book Original Sin, which has been making news all across the country. I'd note that Villaraigosa and Kamala Harris and Javier Becerra have all discussed potentially running for governor. Couple quick notes on this that are interesting. Kamala Harris is not really pictured throughout this book, apart from when she comes out to forcefully defend Joe Biden and some of his mistakes, which then later made Kamala Harris look very bad because she didn't have the full story. Most embarrassing for Javier Becerra, his only mention in the book comes when President Biden mistook him for DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, which again highlights the fact that President Biden likely wasn't having a lot of communication with his HHS secretary. Another particularly notable revelation from Original Sin had to do with Biden's first chief of staff, Ron Klain. Ron Klain got a lot of attention early in the Biden presidency for being referred to as the prime minister because, like the UK, like Russia, a lot of other countries, sometimes there's power sharing agreements where you have a figurehead with no power who does nothing and a prime minister who is all powerful and makes all the decisions. That was the exact dynamic in the Biden White House, where Prime Minister Ron Klain was making all the decisions and President Biden was acting as a figurehead. What Original Sin found is that Biden staffers also referred to Ron Klain as prime minister. This week, California launched a Select Committee on Alternative Protein Innovation, or as some have called it, a Select Committee on Eating Bugs. We've known for years that climate activists were targeting farming and traditional protein as a source of carbon emissions that they needed to get rid of. You'll remember the original Green New Deal targeted cow flatulence for the methane emissions and what it would do to the climate. California appears to be following the lead on that full speed ahead by investing $5 million in alternative protein research back in 2022, which can mean a number of things: plant-based proteins, all sorts of goo, and things like that. But it also means eating bugs. As the University of California talked about, why you should consider eating bugs. They are a recipient of that $5 million from the California legislature. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Please have a great Memorial Day weekend. Like, subscribe, tell your friends. Thanks very much.